Today on Eternal Philosophies, we delve into the captivating story of Persephone, the radiant daughter of the gods, who embodies the eternal cycle of death and rebirth as both queen of the underworld and harbinger of spring. Her annual passage between the dark realm of Hades and the sunlit world above illuminates the mysteries of nature's cycles, where flowers bloom, crops flourish, and winter yields to spring's gentle warmth. The divine daughter, Persephone's origins. Birth of a goddess. In the radiant heights of Mount Olympus, where immortals dwelled among clouds and splendor, a remarkable goddess was born to Zeus, king of the gods, and Demeter, goddess of agriculture and harvest. They named her Kor, meaning simply maiden, though she would later become known as Persephone. Her birth brought unprecedented joy to her mother Demeter, who cherished the child above all else in creation. Persephone grew into a maiden of extraordinary beauty, with hair like flowing wheat and eyes that reflected the verdant fields her mother blessed. Unlike many Olympians with their tempestuous natures and grand ambitions, Persephone possessed a gentle spirit, preferring the company of nymphs and the simple pleasures of meadows, bursting with wildflowers to the politics and intrigues of divine society. She embodied the innocent beauty of spring itself, untouched, pure, and full of promise. The young goddess spent her days wandering through lush valleys and fertile plains, her laughter mingling with the songs of birds as flowers spontaneously bloomed wherever her feet touched the earth. Demeter, watching her daughter with adoring eyes, ensured that wherever Persephone wandered, abundance followed, creating a perpetual spring across the mortal realm. The Carefree Days. Persephone's early existence was one of untroubled bliss, sheltered by her mother's protective love. She dwelled primarily in Sicily, in meadows eternally in bloom, accompanied by Oceanids, daughters of the Titan Oceanus, and other divine companions who shared in her innocent pleasures. Together they would weave garlands of narcissus, violets, roses, crocus, and hyacinth, adorning each other's hair with nature's crowns. They danced in sunlit glades, where golden light filtered through ancient trees, creating dappled patterns on the soft ground beneath their feet. Artemis and Athena, powerful goddesses in their own right, occasionally joined these idyllic gatherings, though they remained somewhat distant from Persephone's childlike wonder. Demeter, ever vigilant, ensured that no male god approached her precious daughter, for she had heard whispers of interest from various Olympians and sought to preserve Persephone's innocent existence. The earth responded to Persephone's joy, offering up its most beautiful creations for her delight: flowers of extraordinary color and fragrance, crystal-clear streams that sang as they flowed, and trees that bent their branches to provide perfect shade for her afternoon rest. It was a golden age of innocence, but like all such periods, it was destined to end. The fateful abduction. Darkness descends. The plot of gods. Unknown to Persephone and her watchful mother, her fate was being decided in the shadowy council rooms of Olympus. Hades, lord of the underworld and brother to Zeus, had grown weary of his solitary existence among the dead. From his dark throne he had observed the radiant Persephone and found himself captivated by her vitality and beauty, qualities so absent in his realm of shades. The contrast between her luminous presence and his shadowlands created in him a desperate longing that could not be satisfied. Hades approached his brother Zeus, requesting Persephone's hand in marriage. Zeus, aware that Demeter would never willingly part with her beloved daughter, nevertheless agreed to the union in secret, perhaps understanding that balance required the maiden of spring to also know the depths. This divine conspiracy would forever alter the course of Persephone's existence and, with it, the very pattern of life on earth. While the two brothers made their arrangements, neither considered the catastrophic consequences that would follow, nor the transformation that would occur within Persephone herself. The gods, in their immortal perspective, often overlooked the profound impact of their schemes on both divine and mortal lives, an oversight that would soon prove devastating. The day everything changed. On that fateful day, Persephone wandered slightly further from her companions, drawn by the sight of an extraordinary narcissus flower, later said to have been specially placed by Gaia, Earth herself, at Zeus's request. This was no ordinary bloom, but one of supernatural beauty and fragrance, with 100 flowering heads emanating a scent so sweet it perfumed the entire meadow. As Persephone reached to pluck this marvel, the earth suddenly groaned and split asunder. From this chasm emerged Hades himself, driving a golden chariot pulled by immortal black horses with eyes of flame. Before her companions could respond to her cries, Hades had seized the terrified maiden and plunged back through the earth's wound, which sealed behind them, leaving only a small lake in its place, formed from the tears of the nymphs who had witnessed the abduction. Persephone's screams echoed across the land, reaching to the heights of heaven and the depths of the sea, but not to her mother's ears, for Demeter had been deliberately distracted. The young goddess was carried downward through layers of stone and darkness, away from the sunlight and flowers she had known all her life, into the silent realm of the dead where no bird sang and no flower had ever bloomed. The gates of the Underworld, which opened readily for the dead but remained firmly closed to the living, swung wide for their master and his unwilling bride. The mother's grief, earth falls barren, Demeter's search. When Demeter discovered her daughter missing, her anguish shattered the natural order. For 9 days and 9 nights, the goddess wandered the earth without rest, carrying flaming torches to illuminate her desperate search. She neither ate ambrosia nor bathed in nectar, consumed only by the need to find her child. The goddess interrogated mortals and immortals alike, but none would reveal the truth, either from ignorance or fear of divine retribution. Only Hecate, goddess of witchcraft and crossroads, and Helios, the all-seeing sun god, eventually offered assistance. Helios reluctantly revealed what he had witnessed from his daily journey across the sky: Persephone's abduction by Hades and Zeus's complicity in the matter. When Demeter learned of this betrayal, her grief transformed into righteous fury. She abandoned Olympus, refusing to return to the company of gods who had conspired against her. Disguised as an old woman, she wandered among mortals, her divine beauty hidden beneath a veil of age and sorrow. The earth began to reflect her devastation. Crops withered in the fields, trees lost their leaves out of season, and flowers retreated into the soil. The first winter descended upon a world that had known only abundance, and with it came hunger, cold, and the threat of extinction for mortal beings who had never experienced such hardship. The world withers. As Demeter's grief persisted, the consequences for the mortal world grew increasingly dire. The goddess of agriculture had withdrawn her blessings from the earth, and nature responded with unprecedented barrenness. Fields once golden with grain lay cracked and empty, orchards stood bare of fruit, and livestock grew thin and ceased to reproduce. Mortals who had previously enjoyed Demeter's bounty now faced starvation. They offered sacrifices and prayers, but the goddess remained deaf to their pleas, consumed by her singular focus on finding Persephone. Eventually, Demeter's wanderings brought her to Eleusis, where she was kindly received by the royal family despite her disguise. In gratitude, she attempted to make their son Demephon immortal, but was interrupted by the horrified queen. Revealing her true identity, Demeter commanded the Eleusinians to build her a temple, where she retreated to mourn. From this sanctuary, her grief continued to manifest as worldwide famine. On Olympus, concern grew among the gods as the prayers and offerings from mortals dwindled. Without human worship and sacrifice, the gods' own power began to wane. Zeus realized that if humanity perished, the gods themselves would face a diminished existence. After sending messenger after messenger to plead with Demeter, all of whom failed to sway her, Zeus finally understood that only Persephone's return could heal the broken goddess, and, by extension, the broken world. The compromise seeds of change, intervention from Olympus. Faced with the imminent collapse of the mortal world and the deteriorating power of the gods, Zeus was finally compelled to act decisively. He dispatched Hermes, the swift messenger god, to the underworld with instructions to bring Persephone back to her mother. Hermes, with his unique ability to cross all boundaries, descended into Hades' realm. Meanwhile, Persephone's experience in the underworld had been complex. Initially terrified and desolate, she had refused food and comfort from her abductor. Hades, though stern and unyielding in his determination to make her his queen, had offered her power over his realm, riches beyond imagination, and a throne beside his own. The underworld, responding to its new queen's presence, had begun to show signs of change. Small crystalline growths appeared like subterranean flowers in corners, never before touched by beauty. Despite her resistance, Persephone had begun to understand the necessary role the underworld played in the cycle of existence, and had started to explore her own power in this domain. When Hermes arrived with Zeus's command, Hades reluctantly agreed to release his bride, but not before offering her a parting gift, a sweet pomegranate from which Persephone consumed several seeds. Whether this act was from hunger, growing affection, or a desire to retain connection with her new power, remains one of mythology's great psychological mysteries, the Fateful Seeds. The consumption of the pomegranate seeds would prove to be the pivotal moment in Persephone's story and in the establishment of the seasonal cycle. In the laws governing both gods and mortals, anyone who consumed food in the underworld became bound to that realm. When Persephone was reunited with her overjoyed mother, the truth of the pomegranate seeds emerged. She had eaten 6 seeds, or in some versions 4 or 3, depending on regional variations of the myth. Demeter's joy quickly turned to horror as she realized the implications. A bitter dispute arose between the gods, with Demeter demanding her daughter's complete return, and Hades insisting on his rights as both husband and lord of the realm that Persephone had now joined through her consumption of its food. Zeus, seeking balance and resolution, decreed a compromise that would forever alter the functioning of the natural world. Persephone would spend a portion of each year in the underworld with Hades, 1 month for each seed consumed, and the remainder with Demeter in the world above. This divine arrangement, born of conflict and compromise, created the seasonality that governs life to this day. Though Demeter initially resisted this solution, she eventually accepted that her daughter had been irrevocably changed by her experience and that a new order must emerge from the crisis. When mother and daughter were finally reunited on the surface world, Demeter's joy manifested immediately. Plants burst into bloom, fields grew heavy with grain, and warmth returned to the air. The first spring arrived as a celebration of their reunion. The dual queen, between two worlds, goddess of spring. When Persephone returns to the surface world each year, she brings with her the miracle of renewal that we call spring. Her journey upward is marked by extraordinary transformation in the natural world. Dormant bulbs push through soil, trees unfurl tender leaves, and animals emerge from hibernation or birth new young. In her aspect as Core, the maiden of spring, Persephone embodies all the qualities of youth, renewal, and potential. The Greeks saw her footsteps in the first crocuses and narcissi that pushed through the last snow, heralding winter's end. During these months with her mother, Persephone resumes her role as daughter and companion, bringing vitality back to Demeter and therefore to all growing things. Agricultural communities throughout the ancient Mediterranean celebrated her return with festivals that included floral offerings, ritual reenactments of her story, and the blessing of seeds for planting. Young maidens would gather flowers in her honor, creating a living connection to the goddess's own innocent days, gathering blossoms before her abduction. Yet, even in these joyous months, Persephone carries within her the knowledge of the underworld, a depth and wisdom that separates her from her former self. She has seen what others cannot see, and knows that endings are necessary for beginnings. This profound understanding infuses her spring aspect with a poignancy that makes the beauty of the season all the more precious. Queen of the Underworld. When the agreed-upon time arrives each year, Persephone descends once more to the underworld, not as a frightened captive, but as its rightful queen. In this aspect, she is known as Persephone Chthoniya, the dreaded queen of the dead, who sits on a throne of ebony beside Hades, judging the souls that come before her. Under her governance, the underworld has become more than merely a shadowy repository for departed spirits. It has developed nuance and justice. The Elysian fields for heroes, asphodel meadows for ordinary souls, and Tartarus for the wicked reflect a more complex understanding of afterlife that developed under her influence. Unlike her husband, who was feared but rarely worshipped, Persephone received devotion from those seeking favorable conditions after death. Mystery cults, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries established by Demeter during her search, venerated Persephone as an initiator into deeper spiritual truths. For what goddess could better understand transformation than one who moves between life and death? In her underworld aspect, Persephone is depicted as mature and formidable, wearing a crown of gold and carrying a torch to illuminate the darkness. The pomegranate becomes her symbol, representing both fertility and death, its blood-red seeds enclosed in a leathery exterior, perfectly embodying the paradox of her dual nature. Even in the depths of the underworld, small evidences of her spring nature manifest, pale mushrooms and unusual mineral formations that bring a strange beauty to the realm of the dead. The cycle continues, meaning in transition. The seasons explained. The ancient Greeks found in Persephone's annual journey a perfect explanation for the mystery of seasonal change that governed their agricultural lives. When Persephone is with her mother, Demeter, her joy brings forth abundance, resulting in spring and summer, times of growth and plenty. As Persephone prepares to return to the underworld, Demeter begins to grieve, and the earth enters autumn and eventually winter, when the land lies dormant. However, within this cycle is the promise of continuation, as winter is never permanent, just as Persephone's separation from her mother is never final. The myth transformed a potentially terrifying pattern of death and rebirth into a sacred drama, offering both practical knowledge and philosophical comfort to ancient agricultural societies. Beyond nature, psychological depth. Beyond its function as an agricultural allegory, Persephone's story resonates with profound psychological truth about human development and transformation. Her journey from innocent maiden to queen of the underworld parallels the necessary psychological growth from childlike simplicity to adult complexity. The abduction represents that moment when innocence is necessarily disrupted by experience, often painful, that forces maturation. This is why the myth continues to fascinate us millennia after its creation. We recognize within it patterns of our own emotional and psychological development. Persephone's consumption of the pomegranate seeds represents the irreversible nature of knowledge and experience. Once certain thresholds are crossed, we cannot return to our former selves entirely. Yet the myth also offers reassurance that transformation does not mean complete loss of identity. Persephone remains herself in both realms, integrating her experiences rather than being obliterated by them. For ancient initiates into the Eleusinian mysteries, Persephone's story provided a template for spiritual transformation and the mystery of death itself. The seasonal cycle became a metaphor for spiritual death and rebirth, with the promise that what descends will ascend again, changed but not destroyed. The psychologically sophisticated Greeks understood the confrontation with the darkness, whether literal death or the metaphorical dark night of the soul, was necessary for complete development of the human spirit. Persephone's ability to move between realms and maintain her essential nature while adapting to radically different circumstances offered a powerful model for human resilience and growth, the eternal cycle. Persephone's myth teaches us that transformation is a cycle of loss and return, each phase bringing its own gifts. Persephone stands at the threshold between opposing forces, life and death, light and darkness, growth and decay, embodying the truth that these apparent opposites are actually interdependent aspects of a single reality. If you've enjoyed this exploration of Persephone's timeless story, please consider supporting Eternal Philosophies by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more journeys through the profound wisdom of ancient myths.